All right, so what's up, guys? So for tonight's performance talk, we're kind of talking about pain again. I know it's kind of a broken record, but we want to talk um, about pain in terms of how to really first scale back kind of intelligently on our programs. This will probably work more with kind of like the more conventional athlete, sport athlete, Ollie, powerlifter, etc. How to first like interpret pain and see how to like navigate that first before truly, stepping back, taking like complete rests, all that kind of like crap. So for the talking points we're going to try to hit tonight, I want to start with how to effectively navigate your programs without sacrificing high performance. I think that's like the priority. What to potentially augment first in terms of hierarchy of what to change, how to listen to your pain, how to intelligently interpret the pain, to, again, see what to scale back, what to truly regress or change movements and variations, and then kind of slightly touch on kind of pain models and when to seek medical advice. So,
in your opinion, what is the first step to augmenting a program and changing things? And then does that vary based on the kind of athlete that you have? If it's a specific like strength training athlete versus a traditional sports athlete versus a, tactical athlete, and then general population.
right. I think the first thing for me is just to identify what's potentially going on. Mm-hmm. What hurts, the mechanism of how they probably hurt themselves, and see if there's any kind of loss of function. So, say, for instance, like a sport athlete in the weight room, shoulder thing going on. I don't want to, not let them do any type of overhead pressing or any type of pressing just because, something's kind of like on the horizon. I want to first kind of scale back like intensities, loads, change up tempos, anything that I could still do for a specific like pattern or muscle group that I'm not changing, or I'm not like bringing them to a complete rest, so to speak. So I think that's my kind of first step.
So in other words, like to kind of summarize all of that, it's all about keeping them in the game, not looking for a reason to pull them out. And that applies to like just the recreational gym enthusiasts as well, where, I think for that population, it's mostly, focused around the compliance and consistency of training, because that's usually what disrupts people is, shoulders start to ache, low back hurts, and then they're like, oh, fuck this, I'm not doing it right. It only makes me feel worse. So I'm only going to walk, or I'm only going to do this, or I'm not going to do anything. So to kind of double back on that though, what is your sliding scale? So like, what's your tipping point for like, okay, I've already dumped the weight, I've already dumped the intensity and the volume, and my shit's just still not feeling right. So what's the direction there?
Well, I want to see if there's like an actual like decline in function. So if there's a disability going on, then okay, maybe we should, if the variations change didn't work, then truly like regress or change up the way we're giving the system. Again, if we're training a sling or something like that, like a sling pattern or like even just a muscle group. And if that even fails, then maybe truly dial it down and kind of control this like spasm cycle. So that's where we're kind of seeing like, all right, maybe we should shift gears here and do like a true almost rehab for that body part, still do the stuff that we can truly do. Because I think to me, it's all about like controlling the spasm cycling. And then from there, as we're controlling that with any swelling, we're creating like optimal environments for that tissue there. So we're not function. And then from there, that increases the, tissue health. And then we could gradually increase like the fascial function and the CNS function. So we're back to, full participation, I guess.
And you could easily sub out swelling or spasming for like tendonitis and even things that are undiagnosed, a lot of undiagnosed, non-specific low back pain, chronic neck pain, things like that. So one of the notes that I jotted down was that which gets measured gets managed. Mm-hmm. So I think that with pain and injury, broadly speaking, we're very reactionary. Everything is done in hindsight or based on an outcome or an event, right? So what I think I look to is like trying to be as proactive and, like kind of managerial in a sense as possible, where I have some kind of framework, some kind of battery, some kind of analysis that I go through on a routine basis so that I develop an equilibrium or what I understand to be normal. So it's for someone, who likes the numbers and the digital aspect to it and goes through tracking devices, for the population that's, kind of the antithesis of that and kind of refutes the whole technology drive and does everything the old school way, or whether you're somewhere in between or a combination of the two. I think it's really important to have some kind of system in place so that you know what your normal is before you try to determine what's deviated from normal. And I think, honestly, the Ollie community, you see people who are very, very good at this, and then you see the ones who ignore it, and then you kind of see how that unveils over time. And it's not even just Ollie, but it's very pronounced in that world from what I've observed.
Yeah, right. I think that a lot of Olympic lifters, a lot of power lifters, really bodybuilders, they kind of know and understand that there's always going to be some gradient of pain in some facet of their training. Like there's always going to be something that needs a little bit more attention in their warm up. There's going to be something that's, tweaked one training day and then it feels great the next, and then it's right back. And it's knowing and understanding your threshold and limitation and what your body not only can handle, but like what you're going to pay for in the long run,
and that goes, not to cut you off, but that a big one on that is knowing your tendencies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right? So like for some people, it's like chronic CNS fatigue. For some people, it's dull, impaired cognitive ability or cerebral ability. And then for others, it's like just this physical depletion. So when you start to get into that point, or what, the technical term being overreaching phase, you have to understand when it's appropriate to push the throttle down and get all the way into the red. And then obviously more commonly or most commonly dialing back down and regressing back in intensity and volume and everything else.
And I think the problem too, especially with like lifters that are so gung-ho and, enthusiastic about it, is that their overreaching phase is longer than, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And for, say for instance, Ollie, it's like, if we're on such a percentage-based system, like, 75% feels so good. Let's go 82.33. Like, no. Just, again, and that's where it's like, stick to the program. And that's where you find like these injuries that come from too much load intensities.
Yeah. And it's because this shit gets religious for people.
Yeah.
And it's a really perfect opportunity to just say, like, for everybody, including those who are following Rude Rock programming, like, you are not married to that Excel sheet at any point in time for any reason whatsoever. Not the exercise, not the order, not the sequencing of the days, and not the intensities or volumes. You are always in constant control. And so, that kind of leads me to the main point I wanted to get across tonight with all of this, and that is, kind of the descriptive aspects or natures of pain. So broadly speaking, we have chronic and acute pain, chronic mainly being a volume issue and acute being normally an intensity issue. We can also throw happenstance on the acute side as well, where shit just happens from time to time and you just sustain an injury. But for the most part, the volume and the training intensities are 100% controllable. There's some uncontrollable nature to life and endeavor, but for the most part, when you're in the gym, you have control of that. So it's important to understand that. With the more micro types of pain, I define it as anticipatory, associated, and assumed. Where anticipatory is like this, I kind of feel like I should, dial back, but I'm going to give it a go. And then associated being when I do this, I get this pain, and assumed being if I do this, I'm going to get hurt.
Yeah.
So I just try to look at shifting people back up that scale where if you feel like you have anticipatory fatigue or anticipatory pain, don't challenge it. Just step back, reassess, reevaluate, play with your variables, position, stance, setup, the type of equipment that you're loading with, and take it from there. Like, it's not a, like the common saying, live to lift another day. Yeah. It's not a do or die every day of every set. And I think people get a little bit gung ho on that.
Well, I think to that point too, that, kind of how we were talking about, Olympic lifters and powerlifters and things like that, those are competitive sport athletes. So when they're in the gym, they're looking at it as, if I don't hit those intensities on this day, or if I don't do my program as it's written, then my competition is going to have a leg up on me, and they're going to outperform me in the long run. And I think it's important for athletes to understand that that's not the case, and being smart and training smart and knowing when to dial back that day.
Or if it's an emotional day, if it's a chronic stress day, because
if you're,
it's all the same system.
Right. And if you're, trying to push so hard, then you're going to end up suffering, not being able to recover better. And then it's going to be more of a snowballed effect down the road, rather than stepping back for one day, doing what needs to be done, and then continuing on thereafter.
Which goes back to your well analogy, right? So it's, or the digging the hole for, with recovery, that's really the overarching message of not only this one, but a lot of the shit that we talk about, because it's so important. People are so binary with it. You're either I'm hurt or I'm 100%. There's never any in between.
Never in between.
What we're trying to say is it's a constant spectrum. You're always injured, but you're also always healthy. It's a matter of how much in each direction. Mm-hmm. And it's incumbent on you, and then us as coaches in this regard as well, to build auto regulation into just your daily practice and lifestyle and habit. And it's not like a compulsive behavior, and it's not a hysteria thing. It's just you being highly dialed in with who you are, how you feel, and how you perform.
Right. And then I think that's where a lot of people miss the mark. Auto regulation. I mean, again, when they're married to percent, they're married to certain things that have to hit. That shit goes right out the fucking window. And I mean, even if you do stay, again, in a lower end of the sub-maximal kind of percentages, Coach Gillespie would always just build strength rather than display it all the time, because that's what over time. So strength is, it's all measured over time. So, and to that point too, where the emotional stress day, it's that's a testament to how multifactorial
now it hit us.
Psychosocial model. There's the biological factors, what we're all talking about, which is literally what the fuck is actually mechanically hurt. And then the psyche part of that is, you're going to either get it or not. And then the social model, if you're around I don't know, toxic people, training partners, they're just going to call you
work
bitch.
Environment.
Very much so.
Kids, tragic events, trauma. I mean, we don't mean to sound over nurturing, but again, these are just variables that need to be considered and addressed.
And I don't even think it's over nurturing, though. I think that there's very much a stigma that people are well, don't be a bitch or whatever, right? Just push through. And despite the fact that I worked, on my feet for 12 hours on my shift and I got 3 hours of sleep, no, that is going to affect you. And you have to understand and accept that. That's not just being I'm just being a big baby today. That's a real factor that is going to affect your training.
Yeah.
And with all of that, I think it's a perfect time to kind of close up shop. Yeah, and if anybody has any questions or comments or concerns on anything about that, whether it's in regards to you personally or if you're a coach with one of your athletes, please feel free to reach out to us at any time. We'd be happy to jump on a group call just like this and talk through any of it. But I just think that these are, vital things to be aware of. So, all of that, I think that's a wrap.